Hi, I'm Wendy Buckley. Welcome to the Hazmat Chat podcast. I'm the president and CEO of STARS Hazmat Consulting. We're a hazardous materials consulting firm that helps companies that manufacture, store, transport, and distribute hazardous materials. And the reason I'm doing this podcast is I want to bring some education to the general public as well as to my industry colleagues. There's so many people that don't know about hazardous materials and don't understand that they're really everywhere. They are in everything we do. They are in every part of our life. We wouldn't be able to have our modern lifestyle without them. So I wanted to introduce you, first of all, to some of the things that might be in your home or in your workplace that could be hazardous. Hair care products are often hazardous, hairsprays, batteries, your cell phone. Lithium batteries are actually one of the most common causes of fires on airplanes in recent years. So it's happened in people's pockets, it's happened in people's luggage, and people don't think about it. It's something we sleep with under our pillow at night, but it's actually a hazardous material. And the reason is because it can cause pretty significant fires that are difficult to extinguish. Some of the cleaners that we use, actually most of the cleaners that we use, in fact, are hazardous materials. Everything from toilet cleaners to bleaches to even certain soaps can be hazardous materials. The hair care products, as we get older, some of us ladies like to use a little hair color. Some of those can be very hazardous products. Relaxers, straighteners, perms are all hazardous materials. And the reason all this is important is because the definition of a hazardous material is something that poses an unreasonable risk to health, safety, and property. Think about that for a second. We live with it every day. It's in things that we eat. It's in things that we play with our children. It's in bedding. It's in everything. And yet it poses an unreasonable risk. But that's in its pure form. That's in its strongest strengths. By the time we get it as consumers, most of the time, it's either diluted or mixed with something else. Let me give you an example. Common table salt. You put it on your steak, French fries, I know I do. It's made up of sodium, which is a dangerous when wet material, and chlorine, which is a poison gas. But when you put those things together, you get sodium chloride, and it's plain old table salt. Nothing hazardous about it other than maybe a little blood pressure problem. So just because it may start off as something dangerous doesn't mean when we get it, it's dangerous. But you still have to understand how it works, because you can't comply with regulations and you can't be safe and treat them with responsibility if you don't know anything about them, if you don't know what you're doing, and if you're not even aware that there is a hazard. In my next episode, I'm going to be talking about that very specific thing about some of the risks that happen when you don't know that it's hazardous. So let me give you some stories from the industry. One of them was a really big oil spill in Michigan. You guys may have heard of it. Kalamazoo, Michigan, a few years ago, an oil pipeline company failed to pay attention to some warnings and alarms and didn't take safety precautions and spilled over 1 million gallons of oil in the Kalamazoo River, completely decimating the ecology there. Another one, a valued jet aircraft, the maintenance crew didn't properly secure some oxygen cylinders. You know, the oxygen cylinders are what they use when you fly in the plane. They tell you put the mask over your face before you help others if they lose cabin pressure. The oxygen in those masks is generated with a chemical interaction. And those oxygen generators expire after so many years, usually 10 years. And so the maintenance crew did not properly prepare these oxygen generators for transportation, threw them in the bottom of the cargo hold, and they caught fire. And because they produce oxygen, that's what they're designed to do. Do you remember the fire triangle or fire tetrahedron from school? One of the most important parts is oxygen. Fire can't burn without it, but the more oxygen you add, the hotter the fire burns. So it actually took down an entire aircraft full of passengers just minutes into the flight, crashed in the Everglades, and unfortunately, no one on that plane survived. One thing I really don't want to lose sight of as I tell you about some of these incidents is that hazardous materials are transported in this country every single day, and it's extremely safe. Let me give you some perspective. So there's about 3 billion tons of hazardous materials transported in this country every single year. 0.01% of those ever end up in an accident, 0.01%. And of those ones that actually end up in some sort of an incident or an accident, a small fraction of those actually leak. The problem is when something does happen, something goes wrong, it goes really, really wrong. So when I tell you about these accidents, you got to understand the chemical industry is committed to safety. They're committed to the public. They're committed to their industry and to transporting those products safely, storing them safely. But when things go wrong in this industry, it's devastating. Let me tell you about one more. So there was a derailment in Lac-Mégantic, Canada, in Quebec in 2013. It was started, there's a bunch of factors, but it was mostly started because they forgot to set the handbrakes, honestly. And what happened was it was a crude oil train and what we call a unit train. And a unit train means somewhere in the neighborhood of about 100 cars of exactly the same product on the train and nothing else. And we contrast this to, say, a mixed freight train, which might have a couple coal cars, maybe some steel cars, flat cars. You get the idea. So this is a unit train, meaning it's all crude oil and about roughly 100 cars. So they didn't set the handbrakes on the locomotive. And eventually the air brakes bled off for a whole bunch of reasons. It's not really germane. When that happened, the train was on a slight grade, so it started to roll away. And as it started to roll away, it picked up speed. And eventually this completely unmanned train with no one on it got up over 60 miles an hour on track that wasn't designed to handle that. Comes around a curve, it almost derails, it didn't, gets down into a town, it does derail. It hits a bar where they were having a birthday party. And in that bar were 67 people who lost their lives and never saw this coming. That train completely decimated that town. So the media kept talking about these bomb trains, but make no mistake, these trains are not bombs. These tank cars that were involved in this accident, they're called a DOT 111. And these trains have been around for decades and have performed admirably and safely. But when you put 100 tank cars full of about 30,000 gallons each of flammable liquid, and you don't properly care for it, you don't use due diligence, you don't use what would any railroader would consider standard safety procedures, things happen, things go wrong. So that's why I'm doing this podcast, to not only let people know what can happen and how to prevent it, but also to remind people that, we work with this stuff every day. If you drive a gasoline tanker, you don't really think much about it. You don't think about the 6,000 gallons of flammable liquid sitting behind you. But again, these things are dangerous by definition. They pose an unreasonable risk for a reason. So we need to make sure that we never lose sight of the fact that these things are dangerous. Every single time we get in our truck, I'm talking to professional truck drivers here, the rail car engineers, the people who work in the warehouses, we just have to remember that everyone's lives around us, our children, our children's children, are depending on us to do our jobs properly and safely. And we have a duty to know what to do. And if we don't, we need to ask someone and we need to seek help, because there are people like myself and others out there who do know what the right answers are and can help you find the right answers for your company. And that's one of the things I'm here to do. I hope you enjoyed the podcast today. Thank you so much for your time. And I look forward to seeing you next time. I hope you enjoyed today's episode. If you want more information, please check out my new book, Hazardous Materials Transportation, on Amazon. Thank you for your time.